Across much of the Christian world today, an intense silence has fallen over the topic of sexual morality. The culture has entirely lost the sense of sin, but the deeper tragedy is that many churches have lost the courage to acknowledge that sexual sin exists at all. Every few years, new letters are added to the alphabet of sexual identity as the culture attempts to map the landscape of sexual self-definition. Each edition signals a shift toward the belief that identity is something created by the individual, rather than a design received from a creator. Look at how ordinary relationships are treated today. Fornication is widely accepted as a standard part of modern dating. Cohabitation is actively encouraged as a responsible, logical way to test compatibility before marriage. At the same time, pornography is frequently dismissed as an unfortunate habit rather than a soul-destroying passion. Adultery is softened by calling it simply an affair. The severity of the act gets buried under gentle language. Through all these steps, modern society has arrived at a specific conclusion: that sexual desire defines a person's core identity. Who you are is determined by what you desire, and no moral boundary is allowed to stand in the way of expressing it. The church is meant to be a hospital for sinners, but when a spiritual hospital refuses to diagnose a deadly disease, it ceases to practice medicine. It abandons its patients to the culture. Rebellions against traditional morality succeed by first changing the vocabulary. They replace ancient moral categories with clinical, psychological terms, moving the conversation away from the pulpit and into the diagnostic manual. Modern diagnostic language prioritizes concepts like distress or impairment. The focus shifts away from the reality of sin and the need for moral healing, replacing them with a desire to simply alleviate psychological discomfort. Using clinical distance this way obscures profound moral evils. When society trains itself to speak of deeply disordered actions, even the abuse of children, using technical, detached terminology, the ancient language of innocence and protection gets pushed aside. This image of children praying points to the ancient Christian standard of childhood formation, one rooted in innocence and wonder. Yet the expanding ideological vocabulary we just discussed is actively reaching toward young people, burdening them with adult sexual confusion long before they are equipped to understand it. Children need to be guided and protected from passions they cannot carry. Guardians of the faith prioritize the spiritual formation of children, preserving an innocence that the modern world treats as ignorance. This photograph shows the Presbyterian Book of Order resting near a Bible, representing a broader collapse in denominational fortitude. In recent years, debates have erupted within the Presbyterian world over whether requiring basic clergy monogamy is too restrictive or exclusionary. Here we see an Orthodox priest holding an icon. Today, some independent groups use these aesthetics, ancient liturgy, icons, and vestments, to bless same-sex unions. They wear the costume of the ancient church while divorcing the rituals from its actual moral authority. This is St. Peter's Basilica, the center of the Roman Catholic Church. Because of its massive scale and universal claim to authority, Rome's actions require specific scrutiny. When its messaging is ambiguous, it creates tremors across the entire Christian landscape. This is Pope Francis, whose leadership is closely tied to the modern pastoral philosophy of accompaniment. Walking patiently with the wounded sounds entirely Christian. The danger arises when that accompaniment lacks any actual demand for transformation. A church can formally preserve strict doctrine on paper, but if it practically welcomes and integrates objective sin in its daily pastoral actions, it catechizes its followers into moral confusion. Christ certainly received the broken, the immoral, and the despised, but he met them in their sin to heal them, not to leave them unchanged. He accompanied sinners completely out of their sin. This mosaic depicts the great Apostle Paul, who explicitly wrote that the unrighteous would not inherit the kingdom of God, while reminding his followers, "And such were some of you." The earliest Christians viewed chastity not as a cultural preference, but as essential for salvation. The spiritual eye of the heart must turn back toward God in a total reorientation. This ancient concept of metanoia demands a change in vision and desire that transcends emotional regret. Divine grace descends to meet human struggle, creating a life of cooperation known as synergy. God provides the healing initiative, but the human person must provide the response, that active obedience. Modern affirmation culture actively destroys this dynamic. By constantly telling the wounded that they are defined by their desires and do not need to fight their passions, it cuts off the very movement of grace required for healing. True mercy diagnoses the disease to offer a path to life. Without the call to change, the church becomes a hospice, comforting the soul as it dies, without ever offering the cure.